Hi everybody. This is the part one video of how to write a literature review. I was starting out, I was just going to make one video, and then I kept thinking of things I wanted to add, and I thought it would get too long, so I decided to break it up into four shorter parts. So this is part one, this is my example. Whoops. So an action research study that I did, I know I already told you about one that I did with listening to children talk about their reading online, but I wanted to use a different example for this video. And it's a study that I did where I had my college students, my undergraduate students, purchase our textbook as an e-textbook. So for many of them, it was the first time that they had read an e-textbook. And for me, it was the first time I had used one, required one in my course. So I wanted to better understand that whole experience. So this would be a what is action research study, because I'm just trying to understand what is it like to read an e-textbook. So it's not what works is the other kind of question that I talked about in my action research question video. It's not a what works kind of study, but it's a what is kind of study. And it was published in the Journal of Adolescent and Adult Literacy. But I'm going to talk through my process of how I created my literature review for this study. I have included a copy of the article in our Canvas course, I think in the Unit 2 module. So if you want to, it's not very long, maybe 9 or 10 pages, I can't remember. It's not very long. If you wanted to read it, you're welcome to. You don't have to be able to work on your literature review. Okay, I did have 3 questions that I focused on. What are the e-textbook preferences of undergraduate teacher education students? So I wanted to know, do they like this way of learning? What are the perceptions of these students? What do they think of an e-textbook? Is it harder? Is it easier? Do you get it because it saves you money, or it's lighter to carry in your backpack? Kind of what are those feelings about the e-textbook in general? And then how do these students view the role of an e-textbook in their learning process? So does the e-textbook help them learn more? How do they feel? That's what I should say. How do they feel if the e-textbook helps them learn more? I didn't study if they actually did learn more, just what are their own perceptions. So in order to answer these questions, I collected data from 3 sources. I had the students journal about their experiences reading an e-textbook. I asked them to complete a questionnaire about those experiences, where I asked questions like, have you read any other e-textbooks before this one? As you're reading this one, what features help you? What features seem challenging to you? So I could start to understand their preferences. And then from that pool of the ones who took the questionnaire, I think I had about 52 students who did that, then I interviewed about 10 students and asked them to elaborate a little bit more on some things they had said in their questionnaire. Now, you certainly don't have to include 52 students in your study. That's not what I'm meaning to get at. And you don't have to use these same data sources. But what I'm wanting to help you see is that you do need to have a triangulation of your data. So you need to have 3 data sources, but they come at the topic in 3 different ways. And you're welcome to use the same ones I did, but we'll talk about in a later video some other options for you. So I collected that data and I analyzed it. Now, when I got ready to write my literature review, I start in 2 places. I do use Google Scholar. I do not use regular Google. And for the very reason that many of the things on Google are questionable if they're reliable. So for this project, you're going to need at least 5 professional research journal articles from within the last 5 years. So regular Google is kind of hit and miss, but Google Scholar, you'll be able to find some things there. Now, the trouble with Google Scholar is it's really limited on whether you can get the full article itself. You may find the names of some articles, but it's not very often that you find the full article. But it's a good place to start because you could find some article titles and authors, and then you can take that to the William Allen White Library where you can use your student ID and have access to a wealth of resources to find the articles that you need. And I'm going to show you how to do that in part 2 of the literature review video. So, place to begin, the type of sources that you need. These are the 5 journals that I recommend you use. It's possible that you can find something in a different journal, but it does have to be a professional education journal. It cannot be a magazine. It has to be a refereed journal. And refereed means that when the authors send in their manuscript to see if the journal will publish it, the journal sends those articles out to people in the profession. They take off the author's names, send out the manuscripts, and have various people read those and review them. Then the journal publisher gathers those reviews and looks them over. And if all the people say, yeah, this is a great article, then they'll publish it right away. But if some of the reviewers say, no, I don't think this article really reflects a high professional level, or here's some things that I'm concerned about, then either the publisher will say back to the authors, well, no, we're not going to accept your journal or your article for our journal. Or they'll say, well, we might accept it if you fix these things, and then you send it back and we'll take another look and see. So the best journals have a very low acceptance rate. I would say maybe 20% of the manuscripts that get accepted. Lesser quality journals will accept maybe up to 75%, but I don't know that you'll find a professional journal that accepts everything that is submitted. So those are the places for you to begin. Now, as you're searching, it's good to come up with some keywords, search terms, whatever you want to call those. These are the ones that I use for my study because I was interested in ebook reading, so I used digital reading, but I also included online reading because those two terms can be used synonymously. I included ebooks. Even though I was specifically looking at e-textbooks, ebooks is kind of a broader heading, and I thought that might get me some results. I looked at regular print textbooks in addition to e-textbooks, and then I added self-regulated learning in there because I was noticing that my students, when they were reading the e-textbook, they were choosing what order they wanted to do things. So the e-textbook had text, video, audio, and web links all within the e-textbook. And so students could choose where they wanted to go first, what they wanted to spend more time on, and that's part of that self-regulated learning. So I was curious if those ideas could apply somehow to what I saw my students doing. So those were my terms. I did some brainstorming. I just kind of listed things that I thought would be related. And it's good to have those in mind as you get started in your searching. Here's your goal: to lead the reader through your action research study that you're writing, to lead the reader through a series of chunks of information so he or she understands the point you want to make. And the point you want to make is related to your question. So here's the point I wanted to make. There's something unique about reading an e-textbook that I'm trying to understand, my action research study. The literature review is the path of thinking I am using to create that understanding. So the literature review reflects the ideas that are, think of them being links of a chain. So you're adding links to this chain, you're adding ideas to try to build a case to help the reader understand the idea that you're trying to present. Now, that's what a literature review is. Here's what it is not. It is not a summary of the articles. So a literature review is not organized around Here's the first article I read, here's what it's about. Here's the second article, here's what it's about. That is not a literature review, that's actually an annotated bibliography. Let me show you what I mean in an example. I'm going to take you to the article itself, and I'm going to go to this page where it starts on the lit review. So previous to this is just kind of an introduction about the study, but here's where the lit review really starts. And I began with something important. I defined my most important term in my article, and that is what I mean by an e-textbook. There are lots of different meanings of the word ebook, and that's what I had to draw from to create the definition. And so I wanted to make sure that whoever was reading my article was clear on how I am defining the word e-textbook. So I included that definition. But this is the beginning of my literature review. And it's really like, think of it like the broad umbrella of what you're getting ready to write about. So for my broad umbrella, I'm writing about how text is changing because of technology. Okay, that's kind of the big, broad idea. So then, and you see here I have my research questions embedded in my literature review. Notice how I introduce those. This study seeks to answer the following questions. So they're right there as a part of the review. And then I jump in. And so my headings right here are my organizational schema, basically, for the literature review. And you might notice something about these headings. I hope you do as I'm talking about them, because you've seen these just a couple minutes ago. So the headings actually are my topics. And what I'm trying to do is build a case to help the reader understand what my point is in my research study. Sometimes the literature review isn't really finalized till after the study is completed. So you're going to do a draft, but you may be tweaking that later on as you go into your study. You may realize you have to add something later on, but for the most part, this is kind of the path that I took. So I first talked about digital reading and then online text, because sometimes those are considered to be synonymous. And then I went to ebooks, and then I went to e-textbooks. And see, all of these are taking me closer to the point I want to make, and then I get to ebooks and self-regulated learning. So now I have linked those pieces of the chain together to make my point, starting with the broad, the digital reading, ending with ebooks and how they let students guide their own learning. And so I have created a path that I've led the reader down to get them to the point where I want them to be before I tell them about my study. So by doing that, I'm looking through all of the things that, not all, I'm looking at some things that researchers have previously learned about my topic. If it was all, it would be huge. So we're looking at some things. You're looking at least 5 pieces of things from your 5 journal articles that people in the past have already learned about this topic. That's the key part of the literature review, is that you're really trying to understand what's there already. And walking through that process, getting your reader ready for what's going to be coming next, explaining what you're doing in your study. So hope that helps you. Part 2, how to use the William Allen White Library to find what you need.